Hello, welcome back to The Road to Episode 9, my ongoing series where I chart the road to the release of Star Wars Episode 9 in December 2019. And in today's video I'm going to be talking about the next Star Wars movie, the one that's kind of buffering us before Episode 9, that's coming out in May in just a few months' time now. We still haven't seen a trailer or anything, even a teaser. Solo, a Star Wars story, and it's not really that big of a deal, but they've been announcing it on the social media platforms that this is the official synopsis for Solo, a Star Wars story. So I have the StarWars.com website right up here, and they say here is where the fun begins. The official synopsis for Solo, a Star Wars story was revealed today, offering some new details on the upcoming film. In my opinion, it doesn't really reveal anything that we didn't already know or had pretty much assumed. So here it is for argument's sake. Board the Millennium Falcon and journey to a galaxy far, far away in Solo, a Star Wars story, an all-new adventure with the most beloved scoundrel in the galaxy. Through a series of daring escapades deep within a dark and dangerous criminal underworld, Han Solo meets his mighty future co-pilot Chewbacca and encounters the notorious gambler Lando Calrissian in a journey that will set the course of one of the Star Wars saga's most unlikely heroes. Whew! So, more like two very long sentences as opposed to a synopsis. So there we go. Nothing we don't really already know. I guess it confirms that he'll be meeting Chewbacca for the first time and meeting Lando Calrissian for the first time. So I'm assuming the beginning of Solo, a Star Wars story, will establish Han as a guy on his own, or maybe being mentored by this Woody Harrelson character. Maybe not, I don't know. And we'll meet Chewbacca, so it'll be interesting to see those two iconic characters meet for the first time. Still on the fence with the whole movie in general. Someone asked me recently what I think about the whole drama around the film. I'll go into it more in a future video, but you know, it's kind of fucking crazy to me that they filmed for so long and then junked the directors and brought Ron Howard in. But he's been working on it for a very long time now, and I trust Ron Howard as a director. I don't know if I trust him as a director who's taking over from a film halfway through. It remains to be seen. I hope it's fun. I hope it's enjoyable. I'm not expecting too much. Certainly not a film I wanted to see. But also we had a leak a couple of weeks ago of this image, which was used in some promotional material that was being prepared in some part of the world. I don't even know where it is. Russia, maybe. And I think Disney, Lucasfilm came out and said this isn't official, but it looks very official. It doesn't look like it's been photoshopped and made by a fan. We see Han Solo there, we see Lando Calrissian, we get a look at what their character is going to look like in the film. We also see Emilia Clarke's character. I don't know who she is or what she will be. Apparently the rumor is that her character's name is Kira, which was the original name for Rey in The Force Awakens, and the sequel trilogy was Kira. So I'm not sure if that's true. Maybe that's just someone fucking around on the internet. That'd be interesting if they just kind of repurposed that name to this character in this film. Who's she going to be? You would assume it'd be a love interest. I mean, that's something we haven't seen yet in the three new Star Wars movies. A love story. You know, I mean, there's people who think there's a romance kindling between Kylo Ren and Rey. I find that quite unlikely and reading into things a bit too much, more than you should be. There are people who think there's a bit of a love story going on between Finn and Poe. There's certainly a love story going on between Poe and BB-8, but Rogue One had none, you know, and it's a staple of the Star Wars movies. You had the original trilogy. There was that kind of that love triangle for the first two films until you found out Luke was Leia's brother. But you had the Han and Leia romance. That's one of the great kind of, you know, movie romances of all time. And then you had Anakin and Padme, which was one of the more cringe-inducing romances of movie history, but it was still there. That love story was there. You know, these films are taken from those classic movie serials that had everything. They had the romance, they had the adventure, the action, the guy and the girl, you know. So I feel like there probably should be a romance in this. Whether people will get precious about the fact that Han is getting loved up with some girl who isn't, you know, Leia Organa, I don't know. But you'd assume maybe it's a love interest for Lando, or maybe it's just not, and it's just another you know, female character that will be in a good place in the film, and not just kind of a side character, but someone who has action and has a part to play in the film. I guess that's fine, but I would like to see a bit of romance in Star Wars. You know, it's kind of part of it, and we haven't seen it for the past, you know, 3 films. And we see the Millennium Falcon, of course, which looks a little bit different than what we're used to. It has the kind of where there's a gap in the middle of the front of the ship, normally, traditionally, classically, is now filled in. Some have speculated this is actually where cargo is placed, and then cargo is taken out, or whether it's just and it looks, the coloring's a little bit different as well. I like the idea, you know, of showing a different version of the Falcon, and obviously by the time we get to A New Hope, it looks a little bit different. I mean, we even have the line where Han says, "I've even made a few special modifications myself," so that fits. Some people saying, "Oh, it's the cargo that he dropped before," you know, when he says that he dropped the cargo in the first Star Wars film. But I would hate it if they set Solo a Star Wars story right before A New Hope. That would not work for me. I mean, one, they've already done it with Rogue One. We don't need to add to that. Two, he looks different, you know, and then that's something that I'm definitely on the fence about, you know. I feel like with Han, you can kind of get away with it, because in Star Wars he was early 30s, you know, so if you focus on him when he's like, you know, 18, 19, 20, 21, you can kind of get away with him looking a little bit different and being a different person. But, I mean, if you were just to take this precedent and then go, okay, let's do Skywalker, a Star Wars story, let's do, you know, Organa, a Star Wars story, we'll do like a young Princess Leia, young Luke Skywalker, and casting different actors, that doesn't work for me, because they were, you know, 18, 19, 17 when they, you know, Luke and Leia, Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher. Well, Mark Hamill was more in his young 20s, but still, the character was, I guess, around 18, 19. You can't get away with it. Any younger, they'd have to be kids. Any older, we've already seen them in the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy. I don't think you can cross over like that. People want to see Sebastian Stan, who does share quite a resemblance with Mark Hamill, but I don't feel like we should be seeing a Luke Skywalker movie where someone else is playing him. You know, it's just too iconic. With this Han Solo one, I can kind of go along with it, because Han was of a certain age when we first saw him in Star Wars. There is a history you could explore there. And with Luke especially, I mean, there's nothing really before Star Wars except for moisture farming, you know, and hanging out at Tashi Station, the Star Wars story. But I mean, there's certainly so many stories you could tell between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, but, you know, I mean, hey, look at what they did with Mark Hamill in The Last Jedi. You know, he looked pretty good as that kind of projection self, as that kind of in-between self, where he had the kind of the darker hair and everything. You could feasibly do like a Luke Skywalker adventure movie, but I do think that those kind of episodic movies are so special that you don't want to keep going to that well. I think that you should probably leave it just as those, just have Luke in those kind of special movies and so on. So yeah, I think the Han Solo character is one you can kind of get away with, but I'm still very on the fence about how it's going to work with this iconic character. But it does help me personally that I was never a huge Han Solo fan. I love Han, he's great. But growing up as a kid, he was everyone's favourite, and mine was Luke. And that's just the way it was. So I've never been too precious about Han Solo as a character. I know people were outraged when he died in The Force Awakens. I was like, yeah, that was a good way for him to go out. It adds to the story going forward. You know, I wasn't too precious about it. So there's that. Anyway, so I'm sure there'll be a trailer coming soon. There has to be, surely. I mean, the months are creeping up now. It's about to be released. They're still sticking to their guns. It's coming out in May, so we'll see how that goes. And I think Deadpool 2 is coming out like a week before, 2 weeks before. So that'd be really interesting to see how the movie does financially as well. But regardless, that's pretty much all I have to say about that. And one kind of very small thing I want to talk about is the Knights of Ren and their place in the sequel trilogy as a whole. So this does kind of tie in with some Episode 9 stuff. I know I'm going to get off track from Episode 9, especially early on, now that we're like, you know, pretty much 2 years away from the release, and there'll be other things to talk about. But as far as the Knights of Ren go, where do they fit into the whole sequel trilogy? Because we heard about them in Episode 7, we heard about them before Episode 7, and everyone was thinking it was going to be a big thing. It wasn't. We saw them very briefly for a flashback sequence, or a forceback sequence as they called it, and we heard their names once, I think, when Snoke says, "Even you, Master of the Knights of Ren, have never faced such a test." Where are the Knights of Ren? We thought we'd see them in The Last Jedi, and there was that rumor that there was a scene with them on the island with Luke and Rey. That never happened, and seems to have never really been in the plans. Now, Rian Johnson was on the Empire podcast, I believe, this week, and he was asked about the Knights of Ren, and he said that to me, you know, there just wasn't enough. We already had too much story to deal with to bring in all these other characters who are presumably the students that Ben Solo took with him from Luke's new Jedi Academy and turned against everyone and killed everyone. That's what we're assuming, right? Because we saw that flashback sequence in The Force Awakens with Rey looking at him with the Knights of Ren and so on. Although that very much made it seem like Rey was there at the time. Again, I feel like the kind of the intentions of The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi are a little bit on a dipping scale with each other. So Episode 9 could either just kind of continue that, and we'll have kind of an uneven trilogy in terms of some of the finer details, or there will be this reveal in Episode 9 that will kind of make things more cohesive. I don't know. It's up to J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio, who's also writing the script with him. Will we see them in the Episode 9 though? I think we will. I think that we need more than just Kylo Ren and Rey. You know, I think there needs to be more of something else going on there. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to do it. I'm excited to see how they're going to do it. And also Rian Johnson also elaborated that he was considering having the Knights of Ren be Supreme Leader Snoke's guards in his throne room. We had the Praetorian Guards, the 8 kind of 4 sets of twins with you know, the same weapons and stuff, and who were all killed by Rey and Kylo. But he said that if they were the Knights of Ren, it would have added an extra element to the psychology of the scene with Kylo killing these people who he'd kind of, you know, so he said he didn't want to get into that and make it a bit more clean and just kind of focus more on the through line of Rey, Kylo, Snoke, and everything else in that scene that is so loaded. And I agree with that completely. Leave that till Episode 9. If you're going to do something with it, do it in Episode 9. But it's just one of those things where it seemed to be something, and then it kind of wasn't. But they could still make it into something. You know, I think that is a story to be told. Is who were those other people that Ben, you know, joined or made them join him, whatever, when they massacred everyone at the Jedi Academy. I'd love to know that story. And I remember saying, I think a year or two ago, I'd love to see the Knights of Ren, a Star Wars, a spin-off movie. We could have, you know, and in my mind I was thinking that it would be, you know, Luke kind of training Ben. We could do that movie, you know, and then show the downfall and show the Knights of Ren and everything. And my idea was that the movie could end with Kylo going off to the forest moon of Endor and salvaging Darth Vader's mask, and that's where we end the film, you know, and then we see Luke going off to the island in seclusion. But I think now at this point, now that we've already seen pretty much the backstory of the Luke and Ben thing, you don't need to elaborate on that anymore. But I'm intrigued by the Knights of Ren. You know, they look kind of cool from what we saw very, very vaguely in the kind of rainy shadows in The Force Awakens. So I'd like to see more of them, and I think that we do need more villains for Episode 9, because I think that Kylo and Rey are these two very powerful figures, and really the only people they're going to care about is facing each other. So what are all the other heroes going to do and face, you know? But then, what other heroes do we have that could viably go up against these villains who maybe have Force potential? And then where were the Knights of Ren throughout The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi? If they're these figureheads, I don't know. So yeah, not too sure what really is. And then there's the Knights of Ren. You know, what is that name? You know, why is he called Kylo Ren? Where does that come into it? I don't want it to be answered in a book, you know. So I'd like to get that delved into a little bit more in Episode 9, but I certainly won't be outraged if we don't get anything on it in Episode 9 either, because it certainly wasn't anything where they were like, guys, we're coming out with Episode 7 soon, and let us tell you, the Knights of Ren are a big deal. No, we heard about them, they were talked about, but there was, people need to kind of realize that expectations are within themselves, really. Unless someone does say, unless, you know, Lucasfilm was like, guys, the Knights of Ren are going to be incredible, then yeah, you have the right to have that expectation. But apart from just saying, oh yeah, there's these characters called the Knights of Ren, and they're kind of mysterious, you know, that's all we really got. Anyway, so I'll leave that there. What do you think about the Knights of Ren? What would you like to see from them? Would you like to see them in Episode 9? Would you like to just leave it where it is? Or do you think they should have been in The Last Jedi? Or, you know, I feel it would have been too cluttered, because there's a lot going on in that film as it is. As much as I love The Last Jedi, I do feel like it's constantly on the brink of falling over itself with all the stuff going on. Personally, it works for me, but it's very close to kind of toppling down like a house of cards. Anyway, so I would have thought that the Knights of Ren would have probably imbalanced that, and it would have just been too much. So there we go. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Leave your thoughts down below on anything I talked about, and I'll see you in the next one.